We are so excited to share today's guest with you. Her name is Margot Curry, and she is a delight because I think many of our listeners are really going to relate to her. She has taken an enormous amount of information. She has a bazillion skills, and she's a founder, she's a startup advisor, she's an artist, she's an environmental activist, and she's certified in plant-based nutrition. So she has all of these things. And what I think is most lovely about her, and I want our listeners to really understand, is that she's exploring. That's what I got out of it. And so today's episode is really about exploring. And as we spoke and the further we got into the conversation, we got into the crux of it, kind of the meat and the potatoes, which I'll give you a spoiler alert. It's about unlearning, because life teaches us that we're supposed to know all the answers, and we're not supposed to know all the answers. We're supposed to explore.
Yeah, it's like being in a playground of possibilities. And instead of having it already figured out, then because when that happens, there's no space. So I love how Margot has really kind of jumped into lots of different areas to try it on and experience, and how that's given her a full flavor of what is important to her and why she's doing what she's doing, and how it's basically helped her navigate her life and unfolding. And so I'm super excited too to have you all listen to our podcast here with Margot, and truly hope that it gives you some spiritual nourishment to allow yourself to taste test different things in your life, to allow what's meant to be coming for in our future for us, that it lifts us up and it nourishes us and it nourishes you too.
So, with that, we'd like to introduce you to Margot Curry. And before we jump into that, reminder that we do have our 12 days of Christmas coming up. We would love for you to join us with the Great Uplift. We're calling it the Great Uplift. And we'd love to get your feedback in one of our groups, our Facebook group or our LinkedIn group. So give us your feedback there and enjoy today's podcast. In a world where achievements and accolades motivate us to do more and be more, we're often left wondering, is this really it?
Deep inside, you know there is more to life. You're ready to leave behind the old, push your way through, and claim the deeper life that's calling you.
That's where we excel.
We're your hosts, Stephanie Allen.
And Marin Oslak.
And this is the Soulful Leader Podcast.
Sit back and relax as we share the shortcuts we've uncovered to help you make shift happen. So, welcome back to the Soulful Leader Podcast. We are here with a very special guest today, and I feel like a foreigner because I've got two Canadians on the line with me. I'm here with Stephanie and with Margot, and my name is Marin Oslak. So, one of the things that I would love to start with today is, can you tell us, before we got on, we were chatting a little bit about our passions and what really gets us going. And I know, Stephanie and I have chatted with you guys about this in the past, and I think that this would be a fun thing just to kind of explore for a moment. Margot, would you share with us a little bit about kind of your passions and what's exciting you right now? And then I'd love to dive into how that's changed over your life.
That's beautiful. Absolutely. I'm happy to dive into that. And thank you so much, both of you again for creating this platform. I'm not sure if I've said it before, but it's absolutely amazing and very much needed in our world. So I appreciate you both very much. So, well, if you ask my partner at any given moment, I am passionate about quite a few things. 12 years ago, I had sort of an awakening about the world, and I started, I don't know, I found some information. I watched a movie called Earthlings, and it talked about environment and world and where we're at. So I decided to dive in myself, and I'm an entrepreneur at heart. So what I did, I remember, I started figuring out ways to combine my work efforts with things that will help the world and heal the world. And then that's when 10 years ago is when I started bringing more mindfulness into my own work and my practice, and how I work with people over the years as well. So right now, I'm working on a few different projects, and really uh, if you ask me what I'm most passionate about right now, it is showing entrepreneurs and showing especially startups, because we all know, if we've been there, we've started companies, it's a very tricky period of, spending as much as little as possible on certain things, knowing how to budget, having the right advisors. And it's really encouraging people who are in the startup world to research anything from packaging to the ingredients they use, and showing them that we can be safe for humans and help the earth at the same time and create a really successful business. So very, very passionate about that topic at the moment.
It's great to have you here, Margot. And I think, something you're bringing up about blending your passion with a business is very important. I've worked with so many people who are, going through a lot of stress, anxiety, and they'll often say, I'm one person at home and another person at work. And that disconnect can be so damaging to ourselves, but also to our loved ones, and also to our ability to really serve. And I really feel I'm so grateful that you're here, because you're offering a whole new paradigm of being in the world, and not only making a difference in the lives of others, but also stepping up and being more authentic to who you are too. So great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Stephanie.
I love hearing your story because I think a lot of our listeners are either people who are in business themselves and they can relate to where you are, or they're in the corporate world and they've thought about, like, what could I do differently? And would I want to even, like, try to do something that is more meaningful to me, which means a startup or joining somebody else's startup, or possibly, we have quite a few listeners who have retired and they're wondering, where do I want to put my time?
Mm.
And instead of just spending time, really, where do I want to invest it? And that's what I hear you're talking about, of the transition that you experienced for yourself
Mm.
12 years ago, where you said, enough of this, and I want to do something that makes a difference, and where that's led to. I love hearing stories like this.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I'm actually, when you mentioned this, I want to create a mastermind of people who have done the business, have had wild successes, wild failures, because really I want to work with people who have also, quote unquote, failed. Society looks at failure as a really bad word or bad thing, when actually those are the people that have the most experience, and they've gotten up, they actually fell and got up again and did it again. And those are the people that I want to talk to and work with and have on my team. And these skills are invaluable. So I'm creating, my vision right now is to create a mastermind of like-minded people who are entrepreneurial minded, but at the same time, they care about more than just the profit margin. And they know that you can create wild success, and care about what's happening to our trees, our animals, our humans, and things like that. So not just because it's on trend right now, the marketing terms and the marketing world, and green this and green that, but truly because they want to make a difference. So I'm very excited about that.
I love that vision. And when you mention the whole failure thing, I just, that's very powerful for me on an internal level right now, because there's so often, it's like, I know the statistics, and I know that that's something that, in order to get any place in my life, I will fail.
Yeah.
And yet there's still the voice that's inside of me that goes, oh, really? You goofed again. Like, that tells me that it's a bad thing. And I think, oh, it's like, at what point do I truly move past that and
Mm-hmm.
not have to first hear the voice and then go, oh, that's right. No, that's a good thing. Where I immediately go to, is a good thing. And our coach has always said, fail as often and as quickly as possible. Like
Yeah.
that's the goal, is to fail as often and as quickly as possible. And like
Yeah.
there's still a part of me that fights it.
Oh, we get in a culture, don't we, of perfectionism. Like, let's just go straight out of the gate. It's got to be perfect. It's got to,
Yeah.
and that's that control whole level of like, and the reason we control and try to be perfect is so that we can feel safe. And yet
Mm.
that doesn't allow any space for growth and
Right.
and dialogue and conversation. And so I know you have a story, Margot, a little bit about your own, like, your own walk and how the things that hurt you that actually opened you to get to where you are now. And I would love to hear more about that. And I say this because, let's turn our hearts towards a different perspective of failure and say, like, this is a way of skill building. This is a way of realization of becoming more masterful in developing our capacity to love ourselves and each other and the world. So I think they're just such beautiful stories, and they're relatable. And I would love to hear more about, I know that you have a story too. So if you'd be willing.
Sure. I'm happy to share any part of that story, and feel free to jump in with questions. And I also just want to touch on one thing before we dive in or change that topic of failure, or as entrepreneurs or as people in life going through this life. We are taught well, there's a hustle that's there. We need to hustle and hustle. And there's sort of an element of a voice in the back of our mind saying, don't quit, just no matter what, you're onto something, don't quit. Well, we don't believe that at all. We think the most successful, amazing people, happiest people on earth, actually know when to quit. We learn through our mistakes, and we see, oh, okay, right now this is going sort of nowhere, or it's going to cost more than it should, or whatever. This is the time to quit, and that's absolutely not a failure. So that's just one nugget. One thing that I have learned personally over the years is really analyzing something and knowing when to say, and let's move on. So
Yeah, when to dismount the dead horse.
yeah, there's a really great book on
The
that.
horse is dead. Get off.
Yeah, let's move on.
Move on.
Seth Godin, I think, wrote the book The Dip. I don't know if you've ever read The Dip, but it's so good, and it just talks about this very topic. So I refer to that. As far as my story, it's very colorful, as most of these stories are. But I have. So where do I begin? I'll begin when things changed. I decided to. After our juice bar, we sold that company here in Eastern Canada. We built it to a very nice level and sold it. And since then, I've closed a few companies and started some, and also helped some of my clients start their startups. So I really believe in bringing all the skills together. We cannot have all the skills. One person cannot do that. So what we really, it's an important skill to be able to recognize the strengths in other people that will fill in the gaps. So over the years, so one of the companies I started was a zero waste product, and grew that to, it was a global company. It's very sustainable packaging. And I felt I had a lot of experience. And what happened was, well, this was actually then fast forward to 3 years ago. And then when COVID hit, we did not, I did not do enough risk management to anticipate something like COVID. So when you hear of companies that COVID, this pandemic affected them, we were on the list. We were one of them. We also, this might help some people and it might not, but I will mention this anyway. We brought in someone that, an operational developer that didn't have the best intentions at heart either. And so what ended up happening is I take full responsibility as well, because we gave this person quite a bit of freedom in the company. So all that to say, we had a lot of experience. I opened this company, and I still didn't see certain things coming, and I'm okay with that. I have peace with that right now, and I've moved on. So the burnout happened at that time when it was just, we were pouring more money into the company, into keeping it alive. And unfortunately, when you're talking about sustainable packaging, and not plastic, a product. It is more difficult for a company to achieve these goals because it costs more and it's harder to find. So yeah, it was a product and a package that came from overseas. So that's around the time where my burnout happened.
So
Mm.
when you speak of burnout, Margot, like can you speak to some of the signs of what you noticed about
Mhm.
yourself, like internally,
Yeah, in
what was
retrospect,
happening?
that's very
Mm.
easy, isn't it? When you look back on it. Uh,
Yeah, like when you're in it, you don't always know. And I guess I'm
no.
kind of like thinking of that. It's like for those who are listening and may not even know that they're in burnout,
Mhm.
how
Right.
would one even recognize that?
Yeah. So looking back now, it was one of those situations where I should have looked at myself and said, wow, like, what are you doing? You know, I was skipping meals. I was exhausted. I also have children. I have 3 children, and I saw myself having, I parent mindfully, by the way, for anyone listening who is a parent. I've devoted myself to non coercive, non authoritarian, very peaceful parenting, mindfulness, and I bring a lot of that to my children because I believe they are the future of humanity. You know, if we can raise children this way. So I found myself, even if we're not a parent, in all our relationships, I was not having time for myself. Um, not have my, I had a very short fuse with everybody, and very very stressed out. It was not me. You know, we just fall into this basically a really insane version of who I was. So, and it was only for the sake of keeping things going. You know, it's just like, and we do need to hustle at the beginning. We do. There's a lot of work and a lot of, but I do feel now that we can do it strategically. We can have a plan, and we can do it with peace in mind as well.
I
So
was just
yeah,
going to
that
say,
was not
like
the
the
right.
work, we tend to think of the work being an outer thing, like,
Yeah.
network more, get more people coming in,
Mhm.
consultants, different things like that, instead of really looking at the real hard work is with ourselves, with internally. Like you had mentioned, you were skipping meals and
Mhm.
had a short fuse. It's like when we start to catch those things, it's like no one outside of you is going to change that with you. It's like,
No.
and I have to remind myself of that. It's like, wait a minute. Oh yeah.
Mhm.
What would it mean to respect Stephanie? Like if Stephanie was to respect Stephanie, what does that mean? And that takes time and space to just stop and go, wait,
Mhm.
I have to stop.
Mhm.
I cannot keep reacting on that same old default because I'm like a full load going down the hill without brakes and I'm going to crash. And not only that, I'm going to crash. I'm going to take people out on the way. Like it's so damaging in so many ways. And to be able to catch that and to ask yourself some
Mm.
really hard questions of like,
I did hurt team members along the way as well,
And
unintentionally. You know,
yeah,
yeah,
I
you don't.
think that oftentimes we believe that if I just get to that next, if I can just get to, right? And we think it's one more outer thing that we need to do. I
Yeah.
need to get to that next goal. Once I get there, once I get there, once I get there.
mm,
And I think that that speaks to what you were saying before of knowing when to stop. And oftentimes that word quit, it's like we have an aversion to it.
Yeah.
So knowing when it is time to stop, that it is a dead horse or that you're the dead horse and you need to like be like, I need to do some stuff for me and some self-care.
and that's
It-
okay. It's necessary. It's not even okay. It's
yeah.
needed.
Necessary.
We
Yeah.
have just started putting, I guess, seeing this self care as one of the most important pillars in our success. So, business, yes, that's kind of a subcategory, but in life in general, right? So if you look at a house that's being built, if the foundation is weak on one side and strong on the other side, it's still not going to work. You know, it's still going to have a weak point. The same thing with what we call pillars of life. It's like, if our um, nutrition is lacking, if we're not moving our bodies and we're fusing together and we're becoming really stiff, it's not, we're going to end up in bed or in the hospital with all this money and all this success for what? We need to. So the pillars of life, one of them is having friends or family, people in our life that we can truly count on and trust. And That's something I've put a lot of focus on in the last few years, is just rekindling and rebuilding past friendships and creating new meaningful ones, because people come and go into our life. And of course, some people are just friends or acquaintances, but it is absolutely critical for human beings to have these people in our life that we can share our deepest, darkest, and most painful points with. And it's also very rare that people have this. It's what I noticed the people of Okinawa, Japan have. They have 5 people, no matter what. These people who live in Okinawa, especially the older generation, they have 4 to 5 people in their life that they eat with every single day. Doesn't have to be family members. And they sit and they just talk for hours and share, and that part of them is fulfilled. And that to me is really successful.
I
Um,
agree. I
yeah.
agree. The environment is so important. And we're not just talking about, and yet that is important too. We're
Mhm.
not just talking about water and trees and
No.
sunshine. We're talking about the internal environment of to be able to go in and say, yeah, this is really bothering me. I just need to allow some space to talk about it and not need the need to be fixed or,
Mm.
but just to hear myself. And then
And
for
to feel
me,
heard.
and to feel heard. And for me, to have individuals around who remember my gifts, who remember my strengths, and don't let me kind of siphon into the shoulda, coulda, woulda, ought tos. Who
Yeah.
can say, Steph, you've got practices,
Yeah.
you've got good
Yeah.
people, you know how to do this. I believe in you. And that's important too. It's like, but again, it's the internal work that has to happen, isn't it? It's like, if I don't believe I'm enough, if I don't believe I am loved or supported, it doesn't matter how much is going to show out outside around me. I'm going to try to do everything I can to try to make it happen outside, instead of going, oh, wait a minute, what part of me doesn't believe that I'm enough? And where did that come
Mm.
from?
Especially if we've
And
been living with it. Sorry,
exactly.
for
Oh,
so long.
no, exactly. And you're living it for so long, and how it fuels us to become that insane person. Like, seriously, we've all had that part. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going
Yeah.
crazy, but it's like that part of me that goes, wait, that's that belief that I'm being fueled by, rather
Right.
than,
The
yeah,
truth,
the
right?
truth.
Because it's like we don't know what our truth is because we've been taught by society, by our parents, by society. Here's what you're supposed to think. Here's what you're supposed to believe. Here's what you're supposed to want. Here's what you're supposed to do. Here's what you're supposed to. So who who has taught us to stop and look inside for that, and to create that discussion and that home base inside that's like, I know me. And we think we know who we are, and then when we start to really look, we're like, is that me, or is that my parent talking? Is that me, or was that I was taught that in second grade, and so I'm just repeating that? And I think that that's so valuable when we can actually have, like Stephanie said, have somebody around us who can go, hey, you know what,
Mhm.
is that you?
Mhm. It holds you accountable. And most of us, and look, I used the word should earlier. I mean, as much as we know this is sort of a journey. It's not really just a destination to healing and we're done, right? It's sort of like, to me, this whole um, journey and life, it's really just chipping away at the healing process and our past conditioning and past programming.
Yeah.
And a lot of that creeps up. And I will say, especially as a parent, I do catch myself repeating these things that our parents did, not because they meant it, but because that's all they knew. And it's really quite damaging to a human being to be living under this sort of false reality or false umbrella, because that's how they see the world. And I always remember that scene in Zoolander where he says, "Who am I?" And there's a lot of truth to that. It's like, do we really know who we are, and what we're capable of? Because yeah, so I have this whole other part of what I do with one section of my clients. I'll share this with you both, is talking about what unschooling is. So unschooling, it's not just about school, really. It's deprogramming. It's a whole life experience, and it's just about, my children haven't gone to school since day one. And I talk to parents about this because whether it's school or any other institution, number one, they learn more every day on their own than they would in weeks and weeks at an institution or at school. But that's quite an extreme notion for a lot of parents. But I guess what I'm saying is they're allowed, or they're given permission to learn what they're passionate about, or learn who they are and themselves, and do that instead of what someone dictates to them. So I know that's
I
another topic, but I thought I would.
No, I love that topic, and it's very related because we're talking about passions. We started the podcast with passions,
Mhm.
and it's like how can we empower the next generation to step into their passions more quickly than we did?
Yeah.
And I read a book earlier this year about unschooling. A young man named Cole Summers, I believe,
Mhm.
and his real name is Kevin, but his pen name is Cole Summers, and he was a 14-year-old kid who was doing unschooling.
Oh, yeah.
Just a brilliant, brilliant young man here in the States. And it's it's a short little book, and you can look up information about him. He's just an amazing young man. Unfortunately, he has passed. He
Oh,
wrote his autobiography though as a 14-year-old. Phenomenal.
wow.
Um, and it was the first time I got exposed to unschooling
Mhm.
versus just homeschooling. And I just thought, wow, yeah, I love that because it lets kids explore. It not just lets them, it encourages them to
Yeah.
explore
Yeah.
their passions and what they want to do, and and like, okay, fail, go for it, and they learn very quickly. Like failure's part of life, instead of like my parents tried to keep me from, like, oh, we'll protect you, which is great, and that's, I mean, that's been part of my journey, and the
Yeah.
next generation, the journey is going to be different for them.
That's where failure begins. That's where the whole notion of failure is equals something bad begins, is when you start writing tests in school, and it's not anyone's fault. I mean, I actually taught in the public school system for 7 years before I had my own children, and that's what solidified my decision to keep them out of school, and not just homeschool them, but to forego, like, to completely uh, use the curriculum of life. No curriculum. And the philosophy is, we don't believe anyone should tell a human being what to learn, how to learn it, and when to learn it, because it
Mm.
should be just inherent. We should be, just like we learn to walk and talk. No one really instructs us. We just listen and we do it. Same thing goes for any learning. And just for anyone listening curious about our own children, my 11-year-old is on his, seventh novel of what's the series? Oh, he's reading a few different ones. There's a really popular. Anyway, the point is he's. I don't do milestones, or I don't see where he's at, or we don't do any of that. But most 15, 16-year-olds are reading this Land of Stories. Actually, that's what it's called, and that's all because he wants to, not because, like, in my curriculum it says this is the book that we're going to read next, but he chose it and he's reading it. And when we as humans, that children are young little people, they're little humans, when we let them just choose their learning, they do it better, they become passionate about it. And it's not some, because if it's forced on us, any of us, none of us want to be forced to do anything. So all that to say, it also creates, what I've seen, my friends who have older children, creates unbelievably confident, trusting, beautiful
Mm.
citizens as well. People who think for themselves. So that's my spiel on the unschooling bit. But I think even if you don't have children, it's really wonderful learning about it and sort of deschooling ourselves as well, because it starts with us. We have to, like, unlearn the past and what we've been conditioned to believe is true.
Yeah,
Well,
I
yeah,
find. Go ahead.
I was gonna say it's reprogramming ourselves instead of out of fear and angst and pushing through, to come more from a place of love and
Mm.
self-directiveness, and getting to know who, like you said, who am I? Who am I really? And coming from that internal place. And I was going to say, when things get tough in the outer world, that's a time to go inward and going, okay, because we make up stories about that. We're like, oh, it must be my fault. I'm screwing up. I'm failing. I'm whatever, right? Instead of saying, maybe you've just stepped outside of your comfort zone. And then to assess, is this aligned with my passion? Is this aligned with, my gifts and my strengths? And is this just something that now I need to go inward and have a look at my itty bitty shitty committee and see, okay, it's time to look at firing some of my itty bitty shitty committee people and putting in some more love in there of like, that's interesting. They're really afraid that committee is really afraid, or they're really pushing back. I wonder why, like being in wonder and curiosity, and instead of, coming from a learning or a learned mode of like, oh, well, I know why they're doing that. And that's why this and this and that, just letting all that go and just being curious and going, okay, it's time for love. It's time for going in. Like, no matter how much you receive in the outer world, financially or accolades or whatever it is, if you don't have a place inside that feels loved and nurtured, or you have a relationship with that internal, it won't land, it won't stick. And then, like I said earlier, then you just end up reacting rather than responding. And you won't have the space. So it's like, it's just such a, I love the unlearning. As a therapist, I do a lot with chronic pains too. So a lot of times people come in and I tell people, I'm like, I don't push flesh. I don't buff and fluff. I don't go deep and hard. I think you have enough of that. That's probably why you have pain.
Yeah.
What if we took because we're all smart enough, like really, like people are smart enough, your body enough that you probably go, I think if I would have figured out how to heal this, I would have already. And I say the answer is deep inside you, but often it isn't about pushing hard and striving hard and ripping the shit apart and all that stuff. It's about being present. And I love what you said earlier too, about like, you're in a place of the unknown, and ooh, well, we don't like that so much in this world right now either. Ooh, the unknown. And it's like, actually, that's the best place to be, because then you're open and you're paying attention and you're like, okay, what's next? Where am I going? But you are in the middle, I say. And what I mean in the middle is like, you're paying attention about what's going on outside, but you're also connected to your feelings and your intention inside, which is intention, it's inside. You're looking not so much goals, but how do I want to be in this life? And what is the universe, or what is life guiding me towards, and paying attention and being in the unknown is perfect.
Yeah. People kind of fear what they don't understand either, so that's the other. And the whole thing about letting go that you mentioned, Stephanie, it's that when it comes to what we talked about earlier, which is being okay with failure and failing quickly, right? And I had just one amazing session with a friend who's just awesome. We had a walk together, and I realized that I lost faith. I lost faith in myself, in that everything will be okay, that you just, do what's right? Always do the right thing and step at a time, but it's going to be okay in the end. And so I lost that. It really just boils down to a few things: love, faith that it's going to be okay, faith in yourself. And that made me realize, wow, not only is failure really important to do as quickly as possible and then restart, but also having faith and letting go, that you recover a lot faster when you have faith. So
Absolutely.
yeah. And when there's trauma in our life, and there's so many layers in people's lives right now, the modern world is not easy. The hustle and the keeping up and the finances, and especially for families or non-families, people just trying to do the right thing. There's a lot of noise and there's a lot of distractions. And that is why I bring meditation weekly into what I do. And slowing down has been the best way to speed up.
So true.
Yeah. So I love that you bring that into this as well, Stephanie, from your lens and your perspective. And Marion, what you offer. Yeah, it's just amazing. So
Well, we just have enjoyed our time with you immensely. And I love the introducing some new concepts of the unlearning and the unschooling to our audience, because I think it is important that even as, or maybe especially as adults in this world that we do think about what is it that I think that I know that's
Mhm.
keeping me stuck, and what could I unlearn and make more space for who I want to become and
Yeah.
the love that's looking for me, that, you know. So I'm excited to continue our conversation, the internal conversation, and then have, sharing with a friend of like, what would it mean to unlearn some stuff in my life,
Yeah.
And what do you want to unlearn?
Ooh,
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's so healing to be able to unlearn things. And if you read anything on like unschooling or that type, John Holt was kind of the grandfather of this whole kind of movement. He used to have a newsletter going to every home, and now anyway his information's online and it's amazing. And also Dr. John Gray, who wrote Free to Learn. It's a great book. It's called Free to Learn, and if you read it from the lens of an adult after having gone through school, it's also pivotal. It's also very mind altering, I guess, because we can go back and we can change these things. So yeah, so thanks for bringing that up.
absolutely. I'm glad you brought it up. And as a reminder to all of our listeners that there are links to everything in the show notes. So if you're driving, don't worry about taking notes on this. You can always go to our show notes, and there will be links for Margot herself, and then also links to the Cole Summers book, which is called Don't Tell Me I Can't, and the Dr. John Gray book, Free to Learn. So I think that's fantastic. I'm excited.
Yeah, I think I said John Gray, but it's Peter Gray.
Oh, okay. So Peter Gray. We'll make that adjustment.
John
Easy to
Gray
do.
wrote something else.
Okay.
Different topic.
Cool.
Yeah.
Terrific. Well, one of the things we love to hear from our guests about is, as we wrap up, is there something that you do for yourself on a daily basis that really helps you navigate in this chaotic world that we're in, to keep you grounded and keep you in that space that we were talking about, of like, of self-love, of knowing yourself?
There is, and I'd love to share it. So I do not daily. There's a few things that I will share with everybody. I've started doing some cold dips
Mm.
in our river. In our there's Clarny. There's a little lake, and then also and you could be in a bathtub. You do cold dips. I do it almost daily, but I would say 3 times a week. But something I do daily that I love, that I've been doing now for about 3 years, is every morning I love cacao, and I'm not sure if you're familiar. There's a difference between sort of just cocoa and chocolate and hot chocolate, and the pure like ceremonial cacao from Ecuador or from some of the countries where they grow it. And I was fortunate enough to know someone who brought me a huge chunk. So every morning I do, you can do it with cocoa as well, or find pure cacao, but I do a mini cacao ceremony for myself, because cacao, you can actually live on it. It's so nourishing. And in fact, it has all the nutrients you need to survive. That's the beauty of it. So I, that's my ritual, is every morning I wake up and I just ceremonially kind of heat it up. My partner and I often do it together, and we just kind of give thanks and do some gratefulness things. And I take 10 minutes and I meditate in the morning. And sometimes on the weekend, or if I'm motivated, I do it with candles. And I really encourage people to look that up. I'm not sure how it sounds, but it's really grounding. It's amazing.
It sounds amazing. I'm like, ooh, I'm in. Count me in.
So in fact, we can do it over Zoom sometime. You just brew your cacao, and the three of us can have it, and I will share with you what I say for the cacao.
Oh, I'd love that.
I kind of give thanks to all the people that brought it to us, because it's not local like a dandelion or other things I've done ceremony with. So we go through a little ritual, and that's what I do.
So I think we need to set up a time for the three of us to do that, and then we'll share everything that we've learned and kind of
Mm,
what we do.
sure.
We'll make a post out of it, and we'll share it with you, our audience. So we'll keep you up to date on that and let you know when that happens.
Sounds wonderful.
Margot, thank you so much for joining us today. I think that this has just been a brilliant conversation, and I'm excited to go unlearn some things.
Thank
So,
you.
for all of our listeners, we will be back next week. And remember, if you share it with a friend, we get our information out there even quicker. We start to help to change the planet, and we know that we're in that time where we need some change on this planet. So you can visit us at our Facebook group and our LinkedIn group, the Soulful Leaders, and we'll see you next week. Thanks so much.
And that wraps up another episode of the Soulful Leader podcast with your hosts, Stephanie Allen
And Marin Oslak. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to dive deeper, head over to our website at thesoulfulleaderpodcast.com.
Until next time.